Hi, this is Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Toby Dempker. Thanks for joining us for another podcast where we pick a topic and see where the conversation takes us. We cover a wide range of topics, but usually around personal development or professional development and all kinds of things related, and maybe even a little philosophy. Maybe even a little philosophy today with our topic. Actually, before we jump in, Toby, I got some positive feedback. I've had a number of different comments, and a lot of times people will say, interesting content, but it's too long, right? They find, to sit down and listen to us for an hour. There's a lot of competition out there for interesting stuff to listen to, but so it was generally the length, but I had some really good feedback from a shout out to Philip and Helena, who are traveling in Guatemala right now, and they said, "Great, love your format. We've been listening to your topics," and so. It's good to know that people like to hear a conversation and not just really a very short edited, it's not, we don't do the quick edits and the very sharp and crisp. And I think it's not like we're running down, here's a topic, here are all the studies, here are all the, all these different points to it. I think we started doing this because we enjoy having these conversations, and we were hoping that other people might enjoy them as well.
Yeah, great to hear that someone's liking it and someone is getting anything from it. I'm getting something from it. And if I can be a bit selfish, that's that's the main reason why I'm doing this, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's give and take. I'm hoping we're giving something, but I know we're getting something out of it. And so let's jump into the afterthoughts. So we did. I actually got some good feedback on the topic last week as well. People, it seemed to really engage with people, I think maybe not a lot of people thought about this. They think about where they want to get to in life, but not who are they becoming. And so, I don't know. Did you have any further thoughts on that? Any afterthoughts after our discussion?
I did. I mean, indirectly, I think it links to the topic that I chose today. So maybe I can come back to that. I mean, let's hear your afterthoughts first.
Yeah, for sure. I think what really stuck with me is, and it's kind of a reflection of the times we're in right now, or maybe just the situation where I'm living. And I think that I was really surprised to hear. So it refers to the kind of COVID situation that we're in, and every country's got their own approach to it, and there's a lot of debate in Germany now about mandatory vaccination and just stuff like that. And so some friends of mine who live in the south of Germany, they've decided they're going to change their residence to Switzerland, and they have the means to do it, so that's great. But another friend said, I just can't handle the sort of state of things, and she's going to Costa Rica for a few months until this hopefully blows over. And I think when you think about this, I don't know. It just seems like there's a real split in the society. There's this majority group that is kind of pointing the finger and judging and disassociating with a minority group, and without trying to engage and understand why they feel the way they do. It's just about blame and judgment. And I think when you have, and then it's just magnified by the media. And so I've been thinking a lot about where is this taking us? And I also, there was a study about how Sweden's children have done much better through the last 2 years because of, they've been able to go to school, and it hasn't, there haven't been the lockdowns here. And so the sort of the mental and like the psychological impact of what this has all had. And I think that's not being evaluated. And so, thinking about the direction that, because I talked a lot about where are we going individually and so on, but I think what I thought a lot about after our conversation was, who are we becoming as a society? And so obviously it hasn't really negatively impacted me, but I look at it, I observe it with concern when I see other people who are in some degree of mental anguish over the situation, and people even having conversations, people kind of, not realizing that the words they're using are really causing a split. Like people love the term anti-vaxxer and so on, or it's and they go, this is all because of, and I think that's a dangerous, like, what are we becoming as a society when we're not engaging with people, we're not trying to understand them, we're just painting them with a certain brush, and we're judging them. And so I think we all probably need to ask ourselves, is this the direction we want to go as a society, where we're blaming a certain segment of people, and we're wanting to deny them healthcare or all kinds of things. That whole discussion, there's a lot of people we give healthcare to that have self-inflicted circumstances. And so anyway, so that's kind of so that's a very serious note to start off with, but and I know we'll get on a much more positive light track, but I think
it's kind of maybe a conversation I'd like to have at a later stage. Thinking about the different narratives that we utilize, or we look at things, right? I mean, now we're starting to see the maybe the light in the tunnel of the pandemic, and see that it might be starting to, we can see the end, hopefully, right? So we're starting to look at what I mean, it's going to be this huge post-action review, right? What happened,
hopefully.
Who did right, who did wrong,
yeah.
And see what we can learn from that. But whatever learnings we're probably going to put our different nationalistic or political lenses on things, and then you're going to be judging, well, it depends on this and this and this and this, right? So those narratives and those lenses that we utilize to analyze this, that's going to be really interesting to see also. What do we want to gain from this, and what can we learn as a society, or as a species, or as human beings, or as a political party, So there's a lot of different lenses to review that through.
Absolutely, and I think there are a lot of the mediums we use now. So we have more access to information than ever before, and that's leading to people, wanting to have people censored, and so that's a concern, because I think the best solution for bad information is good information, or more dialogue, and having a proper debate. And I think the devices and everything we're using. I don't know if you saw The Social Dilemma. Tristan Harris, I think he's from Google, or he worked in the tech industry, and now he's created this organization for ethical use of the internet and so on. And these and what Facebook and Instagram and what our devices are doing to us, and especially our kids. And I think so. These are all things, because I think the state of our digital access to information has also amplified this divide that we have, because the algorithms put us in these bubbles where we have all this confirmation bias. And so I think it's important to be aware of that. And so again, the big question is, who are we becoming through the technology we've adopted, the kind of information we're exposing ourselves to, and the ways we're trying to cope with that. I'm not sure censorship is the right way to do that. So so anyway, I think it's a much bigger discussion. I agree, it's something we'll come back to, and I really hope there will be a post-pandemic review of, look what we became as a society through this. Look what fear did to us. Look at what the media and the way they presented things to us did. And, how has the way the governments have handled it, have you got more trust or less trust in institutions? Because we need to trust our systems. Otherwise, won't get enough people to buy in, and I think all of those things are important things to cover. So anyway, that's in a very long-winded. Those were my afterthoughts to who are we becoming. It was more on a societal level.
But it brings us into to the topic for the day actually, because I mean, you mentioned like, yeah, who are we becoming as some of the concerns and the worries that we have about, yeah, our children, ourselves being too much stimulated by social media or confirmation bias, etc., that you were talking about. So for me, who am I becoming, or who are we becoming, and this constant search for, I guess, that I have in some ways, and I think a lot of people have around us, is what we're looking for in terms of happiness, right? So I thought we could talk about happiness and what it means, definitions of happiness. What is this pursuit or the search of happiness? What does that mean, and
Hmm.
what does it lead to, and etc. So I mean, it's an enormous philosophical topic, but I think it's really interesting that, and I know that you're interested in these things as well.
It's right up my
So
alley. I was gonna say,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you picked
yeah,
that. I mean, it would have inevitably come up. I think it's in the background of a lot of the things we talk about. But
yeah. As usual, I mean, all of our topics interrelate in some way. But for me, it was also been looking at, for a few weeks ago, we talked about, what are our hopes and objectives for 2022, what are sort of our vision boards, etc. And for me, it's very much about making things that make, or doing choices that make me happy, right? Thinking about my happiness as a whole. So for me personally, it's also an interesting, or an important topic, not only for this year, of course, but for how I lead my life and how I make choices, etc. So why don't we start about talking about different definitions of happiness, so we, at least so we can agree on, what we're actually talking about, because obviously a lot of people think about happiness and it's like, it's this search for maybe the future goals, or when I get this, I'm going to be happy, or when I get that salary raise, then I'm going to be happy, or certain achieving certain things.
yeah,
And for me, that's not really what we're talking about here. I mean, that can be a sense of momentarily happiness, or excitement maybe, and that's not really the same thing. I mean, it's like when I get a new car, it's really exciting, and I get a sense of joy maybe for a week or two, but then it's the same old again, and that's not really sustainable happiness, right?
no,
So for me, when I'm talking about happiness, it's something that is a state that is prolonged. So it's not momentarily. It's for a very long, extended period of time. Hopefully for through your whole life, or at least for the majority of your life period. A sense of well-being and contentment and happiness with your overall situation, I would say, with the way that you're living your life, that with the way that you're interacting with other people, the choices that you're making, and you're just, yeah, happy and content with the situation that you're at. Saying that, I mean, of course there will be up and downs. I really think that to be happy, you also have to be uh, go through periods of emotional, what should I call it? Emotional, well, rough times, where when you're not feeling the sense of, I mean, you're feeling grief and sadness, and maybe anger, and these kind of more negative feelings. I think that's an important part of your life, to feel happiness over an extended period of time. So yeah, I just want to put that out there. That when I'm thinking about happiness, it's not about a constant high, that
no.
we're on.
And yeah, so yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I think, just to your last point, I agree. We all need contrast. I mean, how does happiness feel if you don't have sadness? How do
Mm,
you contextualize it, right? And so I think contrast is good for us. I think a constantly happy life would be quite boring. It doesn't challenge us in the ways that although there are people who find they have a pretty constant like level of happiness, but I think happiness is in the moment. I think that's the first thing that's important to recognize. It's from moment to moment, and the more moments of happiness you can string together, I think the better your life will be. But in terms of trying to define it, I think it's really important that and we've already talked about, well, it'll be a future episode where we talk about having a personal philosophy and our beliefs, but I think for me, really defining that for yourself, that what is the definition of happiness. And the book that I'm working on, I've got a whole chapter on considering happiness, but I think it's along the lines of as the first lines in the Tao Te Ching say, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao, right? It's the you can describe it, you can point to it, but who can tell you what it is? Who can tell you what love is, right? It's something you experience. No one can tell you you're in love. You just you sense it, and how do you put parameters around that? And I think there are a lot of conflicting views, and I really like what Thich Nhat Hanh has to say. And sadly, I don't know, sadly, he lived a good life, but Thich Nhat Hanh passed away just after our last recording.
Yeah, I saw
and
it.
I think sadly for me, because he gave so much to the world. Like, he had such a impact in terms of mindfulness and bringing mindfulness to the world. So I think his presence and energy will be missed, but he lived a very full life, lived to 95. But anyway, he has this often, at least it's accredited to him. I'm pretty sure it's from him, but there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way, right? So when you talk about the pursuit of happiness, I think that's what confuses people. It's not this end point. It's not this goal to get to. I want to be happy. Kind of gives us this. When I tick these boxes, then I will be happy. And I think that's not the most productive way to go about trying to be happy. But when it comes to the definitions, there are just so many out there, and I don't want to hog the conversation, but I think I wanted to point out just some different views on it. Like when I think of clinical psychologist Canadian Jordan Peterson, he doesn't think you should be pursuing happiness. He doesn't think that happiness is a good goal because happiness is fleeting, and so he thinks you should be striving for growth and I can't remember all the things, but really of being useful, of adding value, and all these values that I also subscribe to, but I do think that happiness is a state that we would like, that I think it would be helpful for more people to get into. And then you have the contrary view from, it may not be contrary, but when you look at Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he talks, it's amazing to me how he refers back to happiness, helping us get into this flow state, or this flow state is happiness, right? Or it relates to it. So that's one side of it. And then if you look at someone like Epicurus, who Epicurus was somebody who was really spent a lot of his time thinking about, what makes us happy, right? And so and so his view on it was really that we chase sex and romantic relationships, and we think we'll be happy in that, but a lot of times we're just pursuing security, it's our own safety. And then and he said, he's like, the couples that I see are miserable, but friends, they have a good time of it. And then he looked at this, there's this pursuit of wealth, and he pointed out that we don't really think about all the sacrifices to our happiness that we make to gain the wealth. And then he also pointed out that we're trying to we think happiness is this calm or this sense of security, and yet we miss out on a lot of things that could give us joy by seeking a lot of this kind of security. So his his solutions were, he bought a big house and invited us and lived with his friends. Everybody had their separate quarters, but so he really had a lot of emphasis on friendship, and then the reason to work not being gaining wealth, but really more, what can I do for other people, and this, how can I add value sort of thing. And then I think this seeking calm through self-reflection and learning to interact, the calm within the storm rather than trying to avoid the storm. So I think those were sort of his antidotes to it. And it's interesting. I don't know if you've ever, if you're into sort of Eastern spirituality and stuff, but the Hindu, the Bhagavad Gita, they actually define three different forms of happiness. So there's tamasic, which is this they call it self-delusion, and then there's Rejevic, or I think it's pronounced, and that is sort of this this attachment and desire piece, and then the last one. Sorry, I'm struggling here to remember how to pronounce it, but Setvik, which is this pursuit of joy, or this focus on joy. And so for me, the only real authentic one is the last one, right? The other ones are the actually the distractors from real happiness. And I think when you're trying to define happiness, I think it's trying to define authentic happiness, because I remember back, I'm dating myself, but in the 80s, David Lee Roth, the singer Van Halen at the time, and he said, you can't buy happiness, but you can buy the yacht that can sail up to happiness and wave hello, sort of thing. I think that was his quote. And I think that's, if that's what you're going for, that's a more hedonistic view. I mean, people who, there are psychologists and so on that think that, we're all driven by either pain, or like avoidance of pain, or pursuit of pleasure. And I don't think so. I don't agree with that, because I think that's why we have this. Well, in some cases we have, there's meaning that's missing in our lives, finding our why, and so this desire to have a purpose, to find a purpose, to find a why, and to find some meaning in life, even if it's something we define on our own, says that we're not just, we're willing to go through a lot of pain in order to fulfill an ideal. So I don't think those are the fundamental drivers of that. So I mean, I know that was a bit long-winded, but I think I just wanted to point to how many different perspectives there are on happiness, and I think I'd like to leave people with, it's something you can very much define for yourself, and I encourage people to take the time and go, what does it mean to be happy? What does happiness mean to me?
Yeah, that's great, because I think in a lot of these examples that you bring up, I mean, if we talk about Eastern philosophies, I mean, you started off with Taoism, I mean, and talking about the path, and in Chinese Dao, it means path or way. So,
exactly.
And the the path and the balance you have with nature and things around you, and then how that leads you to make choices in your life that will lead to a natural happiness. So this, and same thing if you look at, I mean, maybe more Buddhist values. I mean, you have the obviously the goal is nirvana, and you have what is it, 8 different righteous choices that you should live by to get to nirvana.
Yeah.
And those are kind of these choices are kind of obstructing you from making the wrong choices and leading you astray from the path to happiness. So in that way, happiness is the way that you were saying, right? That the choices you make that will lead to some kind of goal. So this pursuit of happiness that we're very frequently talking about, is that happiness, or is happiness the goal? Will you get? I mean, is happiness some kind of a treasure that you'll find at the end of the path, or is it on the path? And obviously, what we're agreeing here is that you find happiness, or you're walking on that path along the way, and it will be up and down and bumpy, and whatever is at the end of that, it's going to be maybe a bit different from everybody, and there is a definition that you have to make yourself. And I think as you said, in more Western philosophies, and I mean Aristotle was quite clear about happiness. It really it is the objective for everything that we do, all of our behaviors and all of our decisions, and that's the sort of the ultimate prize to search for happiness.
Yeah, and happiness. Everybody's going to find their own thing that makes them happy, right? I mean, some people are really being altruistic, really giving of themselves, and other people like success and they or the connection that they have with family and other people, or learning new things. There's just so many ways that people look to be happy. And I think when you talk about, I mean, you can look at it purely from a biological standpoint, and if you see happiness as how you feel, right, then a lot of that's dopamine driven, and dopamine has been called the sort of the reward chemical in the brain, but really it doesn't reward you. It is when you have anticipation of a reward, or you have anticipation of a success, that's actually when your dopamine spikes. Like you don't when you we were talking about the social dilemma in our devices, and you don't get the dopamine rush from actually reading the message that comes through. You get the dopamine rush from the signal your phone gives you that tells you you've got a message, that tells you you've got some kind of a feedback, or you've got likes, or you've got responses, and it's that anticipation, right? So again, it's the journey there. It's the the feedback you're getting is telling you if
stimulus, right? So what kind of stimulus
absolutely.
are feeding your, well, in this sense, in this case, the dopamine, right, or whatever chemicals are triggering your those feelings.
And this is why I think happiness is. This is where I disagree with Jordan Peterson. I mean, obviously he's more accomplished and more intelligent than me, but this is an area where I think I think happiness is valuable, because for me, happiness is a really good feedback. It's a feedback loop for us. I tried this, it doesn't make me happy. I tried something else, right? And the problem is, a lot of people, out of fear, out of obligation, out of this is what I was told is the right thing to do. So out of conditioning, they will pursue and do things that that don't make them happy. And I think. And this is something that I was hoping we would get to in this conversation. The reason I think happiness is so important is because I believe that happy people are far less inclined to do bad things in the world. The more happy people we have, I think, I don't think happy people will abuse their partner or their kids, or do harm to others or hate others. I think we're far less inclined to put negative things out into the world when we're in a state of happiness, or when we're experiencing regular happiness on a regular basis. So I think it's really important for putting something good into to creating a better society. It's only been in the last few decades that a few countries have done the sort of happiness index. I know the Danish do it because they're always at the top, but also when you look at a small country country Bhutan, right? They have an extremely high level of happiness. And it's not like I don't know what the quality of life is in Bhutan, but I think they're very agrarian. They live off the land, and they have they have a king.
Wasn't it there it started? The whole idea.
Yeah, I think so.
They realized that we're never top of GDP, and if we're only focusing on financial figures, we're never going to be successful.
Well, GDP, I think, is the absolute wrong measurement, and we've known that for a while. That GDP is
yeah, but
absolutely the wrong
that was
measurement of.
that was the only thing that we were looking for in the past, right?
Yeah, even
So,
economically, it's not the right way to measure it because it doesn't take in all the costs in order to to drive that growth. But yeah, it's certainly not an indicator of happiness because of look at the richest country in the world is the United States, and they have some of the highest rates of suicide and depression, right? So
yeah.
and the highest rate of drug abuse. So I mean, I think something like 80% of the world's cocaine is consumed in the U.S. I mean, that's an old statistic, but I mean, it's pretty out there. So clearly, all the indications are that's not the example of happiness.
Yeah. No, and I think if you're looking at these kind of statistics, if I remember correctly, I think Finland was the happiest, like on top of this happiness index the last time I was looking. For a Swede, that's very odd.
Is there a rivalry between them?
There's a good rivalry.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's interesting, and what you say. I mean, and especially if you look at this from a positive psychology point of view. I mean, the argument is very clear that happiness leads to more sustainable choices, less abuse of alcohol, drugs, violence, etc. More success, however you want to define that, but in terms of career, work, and salary, these kind of things. So, and I think in those terms, Finland has been doing really, really well. So, yeah.
Well, actually, let's look at Finland a little closer then, because I think I've in years past I did some work in Finland, and we had some people from the company that would be stationed there for a year, and people from Ireland, and they really struggled because it was so dark in the winter and so on. So it's interesting from someone outside the culture to come in, they struggle, but then the Finns are very high, and I know. One thing that pops to mind right away is they have a very progressive school system. They have one of the top education systems. And so when you have a very positive learning environment for children, that maybe leads to very productive and happy adults. I don't know. I mean, that's obviously it's more complex, and I believe in systems thinking, so obviously there are a lot of other factors. But I think, look, there's something we could look at, and I really believe in what did people do differently. There's actually a woman who did a TED Talk. And I'm great at forgetting people's names, but she's
remembering it.
she's a Dane, and she I think she wrote a book called Happy Like a Dane or something like that. But talking about what is it that Danish people do differently. So I guess Swedes are gonna have a real complex. So you've got the Finns who are ranking high on happiness, and you've got the Danes who are almost always at number one, and you're sandwiched between them.
Yeah, well, I guess the Nordic countries are usually doing pretty good in these kind of.
Well, you have a great social infrastructure. Like you have this, in the U.S. they point to the Nordics as socialist countries, but actually you're not, because socialism is, the government owns the means of production, and that's not the case. But you have a social safety net. You take care of each other. There's I think that is feeling a sense of, I'm not going to, if I get sick, I'm going to be taken care of. I'm not going to be homeless. I'm not, I think those, when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the food and shelter, I think those are big ones, and I think those fears are eliminated for the most part in the Nordics, right?
Yeah, for the most part. So, I mean, if you compare it to a lot of other places in the world, for sure, there is an argument that self-determination theory is coming in here, and I mean, as you just said, that we, according to Maslow's theory, that if you have the choice to really determine your own future and focus on what you can become, to relate to last conversation, that relates a lot to your happiness, but also in terms of intrinsic motivation. So do you have the autonomy? Do you have the autonomy to make your own choices, to pursue what you are interested in doing, And that goes with mastery and relatedness as well, right? That
Mm-hmm.
you have your own choices to master and pursue something that you're really good at, to follow your what's driving you, and relatedness in terms of the society as a whole that are constructing institutions and networks for you to succeed. And I guess one good example is Finland's education system. Definitely, I mean, it's a good foundation for success of future things. But as you said, I mean, from a systemic point of view, there's a lot of different parts that needs to fall into place. But that's one of the puzzle bits, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good that you point out the freedom piece, because I think maybe when we look at some of the restrictions we've gone through, like living in Germany or even traveling through Europe, or talking to people around the world, even in Canada. In Canada, there's this big convoy of truckers now, and they part of they're talking about the freedom to choose and the freedom to move. And I think that freedom is probably one of the things that's contributing to sort of, if you can say, the lack of happiness. I mean, there's a lot of things that are frustrating, but when you look at the two things that people feel like they've lost to some degree, is some degree of freedom to choose and how to live their life, and connection. We're connecting through digital devices, through screens, but being able to hug people, being able to have close contact and face-to-face conversations. So between the lack of freedom and autonomy and the lack of a connection with people, I think those two have really contributed to sort of a decline in happiness, if you can say, through sort of the last almost 2 years that we've been living through.
Yeah, if you look at one parameter of physical well-being, it definitely seems to be the case, especially among younger people. I saw some statistics around that. It was really grueling, actually. So hopefully we're at the end of that.
Yeah. But it's still an important thing if you put yourself, even irregardless of the current situation you're in, right? When people, they pile on a whole lot of debt, and they just put themselves in situations where it limits their options, limits their choices, and then they think it's the right career path, and they think this is how I'm going to get the money and the security that I need, and yet they're miserable because they don't have time to see their friends, they don't have those connections, and they don't have any choices because they've committed to a certain path that whether they like it or not, there's no divergence from that. So, I think those are Important things to consider. And again, I'm not saying there's a right and wrong way here. Just like there's no one right way to happiness. But I think those are important things to consider. And I think that's also a reflection of my own bias and my own values, because, things like freedom, authenticity, those kind of things are really important. And so when you put yourself in situations where you can't be yourself, or you don't have the freedom to choose, I know that's going to affect my happiness, because there's an incongruence between my values and the way I'm living my life. And so values is a really important one to consider when you're trying to figure out, why am I not happy, right? Because in coaching, I will have people come to me that go, I've ticked all these boxes. I tell this to people all the time. It's interesting to see people who are outwardly successful come to me and go, look, I've done all the right things, from education to my relationship to family to whatever, to the job and career, and yet I'm still not happy after checking all these boxes. And that's because they've followed this formula that society tells them will help them reach happiness. They've been conditioned to, this is the way to go. And then rather than you sort of following their inner signals or their values, their core values, and not sacrificing those. I think if you consistently sacrifice too many of your core values, excuse me, I think that that's a recipe for unhappiness, right?
Yeah, definitely. I'm also thinking, it made me thinking when you were talking also about expectancy. I mean, what are you expecting, or sort of, yeah, what are you expecting to gain, or to obtain from your actions, or from your choices, and of course, by looking at people in your society, in your network. I mean, I've always been interested in, when I was living in China, to look at. I mean, I see Chinese as, I mean, statistically, they're not, on top of happiness index or anything like that. You still see a lot of really happy people, and it's usually people who are not maybe in a financially fantastic situation, but people can be very, very happy and content anyway. I'm very close to I mean, Chinese has very, very strong values about family and etc. Quite, I mean, Chinese, Confucian traditional values like that.
Can I
But
ask you
still,
something? Can I just ask you something about China? So, someone told me that Asians don't. Well, not all Asian cultures have a word for happiness. Is there a word for happiness in Chinese?
yeah, 幸福, I would say.
Oh, okay, okay,
And it's a very, yeah, I would say that, yeah, and it's a very important word.
oh, okay,
It's a very, very important word, and a good value. And actually now, I mean, now I think it's translated as prosperity, but the common prosperity is a political kind of slogan now
hmm,
in the Xi Jinping area.
okay.
Um, Actually, that's 富裕, and 幸福 is a bit different. But yeah, there's a word for happiness in Chinese for
Okay,
sure. Yeah.
because I know the Dalai Lama. I mean, he's had he's written a lot of books, or had them written for him, or whatever. But or someone's written them through his words. But I've read quotes from him where he thinks happiness is the purpose in life. The striving for joy, and I think that comes from that's in line with my own belief that if you're happy, you will be more productive and do better things in life, and be better to your fellow humans.
Mm.
So obviously, in that Buddhist, at least Tibetan Buddhism, happiness is a key one. And I think you're right. I mean, in my traveling, in my backpacking through Southeast Asia and India, and seeing extremely poor parts of the world, and yet really, seeing happy, smiling, inquisitive kids and people wanting to talk to you, just fascinated where you've come from.
Mm.
And I remember saying that I bet you I could offer one of these people a high paying job in Europe and they would not take it, because their whole they've got their community, their family. They derive joy and happiness through that connection.
Mm.
And I think probably the Buddhist philosophy has a lot to do with it. They just, it's what Nietzsche also talked about, amor fati, the love of
Mm.
fate. They believe in karma, and they go, well, this is my karma, and they accept it. And I think that's this. Maybe in Western thinking, this always striving is part of what makes us unhappy. And when you talked about expectations, I
Mm.
think that is part of it. It's a double-edged sword. I think having expecting good things is a positive way to strive for things, and to internalize that I expect things to work out, or I expect to be paid well and to have great projects. And I think that actually drives me in a positive way, and it aligns my inner signals to make the right choices to what I want. But on the other hand, I think a lot of people, they don't know how to deal with disappointment, and so for them, expectations is really undermines their happiness, because
Mm.
they have all these expectations of other people, how people should be, and they're constantly disappointed. And it's this philosophy of I've got to control the world and get it to conform to my way of thinking in order to be happy.
Mm.
And I see this in a lot of postmodernist, a lot of the people in North America that are we've got to force people to think and act a certain way, in order so that we can be happy, or we can feel equal, and we can feel a certain way. And I think that's an impossibility. You won't be able to control people to such a degree that no one will ever offend you, or no one. I think that's why this whole happiness is from within. It's an inside job. It's and only. And this is what I always come back to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, because what was so powerful for me in that book, it's just a little book, but here's a man who was in a concentration camp, lost his loved ones, and still found hope, happiness. He could find happiness in a sunbeam, and just that moment. And that's why happiness is really in the moment. And all these circumstances, and probably nobody listening or any of us will ever have to go through that kind of horror, and yet he was able to find moments of happiness in that. And I think that points towards the job we have to do if we want to be happy, is letting go of what's happening out there and really focusing on what can we control internally. And that's also obviously a very stoic approach to the world, right? What do I have control of? What can I control? So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that relates to where I was going before. I mean, for instance, people that I was working with in China, migrant workers that could, their core values is very much about their families, but still they can only go back and see their families 2 weeks per year, for instance. For myself as a father now, that's unthinkable, And so what kind of expectancy do you have? What kind of expectations do you have in those sense? But also, how do you find happiness in those other moments and in the situation around you and with people that are surrounding you? But still, hope is, the hope and your expectations of what's lying ahead of you to still pursue, what's really important for you, and to know that, you have happiness now, and your happiness, if your family is somewhere else, as an example, that their fortune and their health is making you happy, but there's a stretch there, and you can't feel it right now, but you understand that you're gonna be able to touch them and talk to them and feel them very, very soon. So even if you're not holding it, there's something there in that relatedness that you can't even, there's no immediate connection, but you can feel it.
Yeah,
it's a bit abstract, perhaps.
No, but I wonder if when you have that example that that you've got these family values, but you've only got these moments that you're working towards, and I think in itself that gives you a degree of purpose. And so if you know the thing that I'm struggling for because I'm supporting my family, or I'm going to be able to see, and they find happiness in that journey there, and in that eventual reward, if you want to call it that. So yeah, I think it's to do with expectations, managing, just accepting that that's your fate, can be part of it, but also giving meaning to your life and your existence, and giving purpose to what you're doing. I think all of those things are contributing factors.
And I guess I realize when I'm saying it, I think one of the most important issues here is your relatedness with others. That you find happiness about caring for someone else than yourself. That you're doing selfless acts. Whatever hardships or things that you have to go through is to the benefit of someone else. That is something that's really feeding this sense of happiness and satisfaction. And I know that there's a lot of theories about this, that or philosophies about it, that the act of giving, or the act of selflessly giving to someone else, that is actually the essence of happiness, and that will lead to happiness for yourself as well.
That word selfless, I have a have an aversion to it. But I'll get to there in a second. But it points to, in whether it's in Europe or North America, there's and I guess even that's starting to sort of take hold in parts of. I've seen it in Africa too, but this individual success, right, and this individuality and this individual self-fulfillment, there have been some critics of that, and I wonder if it's tied to there's a rising sense of nihilism. This, hopefulness, we're all screwed anyway. The world, there's no fixing humanity, and this very negative view of where things are headed, and sort of this loss of hope. And it seems to be far more in affluent countries than it is in poorer countries. And I wonder if that's part of it. And this very much about what I'm trying to achieve, what I've got to do, what my identity is, rather than what's my role in the community. It's all about me, and I wonder, is that affecting our happiness? Because certainly nihilism takes you away. It's the wrong direction when you're trying to be happy. But on the other hand, when it comes to, is pursuing happiness selfish, right? So maybe I'll explain my aversion to the word selfless, because I think, when I look at my meaning to life, what's the purpose, and I think the purpose is to fully realize. In my coaching, my tagline is your guide to the best you, right? It's about trying to make the best of yourself, because that's all you have control of, and this self-realization, and I think the people that are truly selfish are those who try to be happy at the expense of others. But I think the people who really find happiness are people who find happiness independent of others, free from the expectations of others, free from the judgments of others, and just being similar to finding that confidence, but also finding that sense of happiness, independent of what's happening in the external world. Again, because I believe that if everyone took care of themselves and made themselves happy, we would have less strife in the world. The thing is, so many people make their happiness dependent on other people. If you're not willing, if you don't love me back, or if I can't have the partner I want or the job that I want, I can't be happy. And they make it all about external conditions rather than finding ways to be happy, as Viktor Frankl did, or in an extreme case, but also anybody who finds contentment and satisfaction in the little things in life, because happiness is, like we said, it's not the destination. It is the way. So it's all about presence and being present in the moment. And as I've given the example before, I've been doing it for more than 20 years. This whole, when you get on the airplane, people say, put on the mask first and then help children and those around you, because if you're not at least achieving a certain level of happiness yourself, how are you going to help other people? And this, from a coaching perspective, this is why I'm constantly trying to learn new things, constantly trying to be a better version of myself, because I think if I can maintain more happiness, I will have more to contribute. And if I can implement more good habits and follow a certain behavior, I think I can be a better example for other people. And so I think there is a part of it that is working on yourself. And so I don't think looking for your own happiness is selfish, as long as you're not doing it at the expense of other people. So, and being selfless, I think, defeats the, we are individuals and we're interconnected. I think it's not one or the other, and so I think it's important to try and make sure you're healthy, make sure you're happy, make the most out of your potential, and then see how that contributes to others, and recognize how what you're doing affects other people, recognize the interconnectedness of all of us. So I think that's a balanced way of pursuing happiness. Oh,
Yeah,
pursuing
a few
happy. I misspoke there. Not pursuing happiness, but striving to find more moments of happiness, I think, is the way I'd
Yeah,
like to
okay, yeah.
prefer to formulate it.
I was gonna comment on that actually.
It's
But
these words that we get conditioned to use, right? And I
yeah, I
find
know.
I struggle sometimes not to fall back on these kind of things I've heard so many times.
Yeah. And also, I mean, that's another reflection. I mean, we're so programmed to be goal oriented, you know. So yeah, we need to think about what's ahead of us and what's there and what's there. So I mean, if, for even as coaches, I mean, you know, you're always thinking about what's the objective here? What's the objective? What are we leading to? So and as a consultant or facilitator or whatever. So I mean, it's very easy to have that in mind. So we're pursuing something, and yeah, it's happiness or whatever it is. So yeah, I think it's a natural kind of reaction or behavior. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I agree. I totally agree that you know, to that selfish, selfless, that whole the balance between the those terms. But I really want to highlight that part of the interconnectivity that we. I mean, again, if we go back to systemic thinking, thinking about the interlinks and the connections that we have to each other, that we're part of some kind of ecosystem with the planet, with the earth, with other people, and whatever we do will have an effect on other people. Um, but again, I think the expectancy there is really important. What do you expect to get something back, or you know, what is what is the expectancy on the return or something?
Hmm.
That's a really important issue when you're thinking about what's going to give you happiness. If you're not getting that, okay, are you going to be disappointed, or is that just something that you can roll with, or is it not even on the agenda?
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's I think that's an interesting thought for reflections. You know, so what's on your agenda for doing certain things, or for your choices?
Yeah. So I think maybe we can also point to a few things to help cultivate more happiness. And I think it's hard to be happy if your physical state is not if you're not healthy. I mean, although there are people in cancer wards that are they're not the ones suffering. It's the people who are observing them sort of deteriorate. But it's if making sure you're putting yourself in the right state to allow more happiness. I think your environment is really important, right? I remember one of the great things about when I backpacked through Asia was I had very little contact to the news and stuff like that, and so I try and remind myself that it's not healthy to be watching the news every day. I mean, now we have 24-hour news channels, and people are constantly inundated on the hour. You've got the news of the hour, and are you really missing out if you don't listen to that every hour or every day? If just like when I work with people on time management, they when the emails come in and I got to respond right away. Well, one of the key time management tools is only block a certain amount of time to do emails, and then use the rest of your time to do other productive things. And the same thing, if you want to be informed and you want to make sure that you're on top of things, then put a certain amount of time every week aside, but don't inundate yourself. Don't create this, because now more than ever with this attention economy where the most clicks is what sells to advertisers, right? So news needs to they're a business and they need advertisers and sponsors, and so if you're finding that. I find more and more news is sensationalized, and there's less journalism, more opinions, because that sells more. People like to see people debating and or talking about an opinion that confirms their own. And so is exposing yourself to that daily healthy for you? Does it help you achieve more happiness? We know that things like exercise, getting out into nature. We know there was a study done that I read last year, done in a German city, I think it was Dresden, and they actually noticed, and it was very limited parameters, but they based it on prescriptions for antidepressants, and they found that people living in green areas with more trees had far lower prescriptions for antidepressants than people who lived in a gray city block that had, barely any trees. And so, the correlation is there. If you get into nature, if you have some connection with nature and green and plants, it's good for you. So I think your environment and cultivating the right state for yourself, and the kind of, it's not just feeding yourself healthy food, it's feeding yourself healthy inputs, information, emotional stuff, and making sure you're surrounding yourself with people that also bring out the best in you, and you'll be happier. And and making sure that the things that you're doing with your life feel like they have, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is the whole thing about flow is when you're doing things that you really get immersed in, you will feel happy, you will get in that flow state. So I think those are my whole bag of try and get more of those, and you'll find more happiness. What about you?
Yeah, so I started laughing a bit there because that would be a very grim kind of benchmark for happiness, looking at the level of antidepressants that we're consuming in certain areas.
Yeah, but how else do you want to measure it, right? I mean, I know there are other measures, but I think it's an interesting way to look at it. They were just trying to see if there's a correlation between nature, trees, green, and happiness, and how else do you measure that? In a short study, but I thought it was an interesting corollary anyway.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, then the whatever area you can't afford antidepressants or you haven't heard of them, there will be that.
Well, not in Germany. In Germany, you can get them prescribed, and your health insurance pays for it. So. So it's not about affording it.
That was just a side note. But I think that's great. And going into the choices that we make and what makes you happy, because that's something that I'm thinking about a lot. And I mean, the core question for me there is what makes me truly happy, like what's genuinely making me happy, and also this long-term perspective on things. And so I can. If I drink 5 beers, I'm going to be feeling really happy, but I'm not going to feel very happy in the morning, perhaps.
Yeah, well, from a hedonistic, so a pleasure-seeking, so let's think about what does having a few beers do, right? So obviously, reduces inhibitions. It makes you less self-conscious. It maybe reduces anxiety. For some people, alcohol amplifies it. But so that's the effect that it has for you. But is that your definition of happiness?
No, of course, and that's what I'm saying. So that's where we started. How do we define happiness? Yeah. However, I mean, one of the things that really make me happy is the interconnectedness with other people, and especially people that I care about. And for me to have 5 beers together with some mates, that will make me very happy. So cultivating that, not every day, obviously, but from time to time, thinking about how I spend my time with my friends, and that's something that I'm really lacking now. Not only friends, just people around that I care a lot about. Making sure that I interact with people that I enjoy being with, and it's this non-expectant relationship. I don't expect to get anything back from them. It's just it's a natural sense of being together or something. So that's one thing. And for me, obviously, physical entertainment is really important. So for me, doing my sports and stuff like this, keep making sure that I'm in a good, healthy space. That makes me very happy. These kind of things, but also making sure that I'm learning new stuff. So I realized yesterday I was dealing with something on music software, and I had this issue that I haven't been able to solve for months. I could not understand what it was, and I was able to find it was just a click of one button, and it solved the whole problem. I was ecstatic. So maybe that's a short-term victory, but this along the path to pick up new things, learn new stuff, learn new perspectives, and I mean, I guess both of us are very interested in listening to other stories and listening to perspectives and these kind of things. And I think that's really important for me, at least, to make me happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Actually, that makes me think about a lot of people they live for the highlights, right? That vacation that they're going to go on, that big purchase that they're finally going to make, like these big events, and then it almost seems like everything else in between those is filler. And I think finding more happiness in your life is about appreciating the little things, and finding those little moments of happiness. If I like yesterday was a beautiful day in Hamburg. It was, it's winter, but and it wasn't super cold, but the sun was out, and I was able to walk through nature, and I was like, what a glorious morning, right? And just taking a minute to breathe. And this is again, Thich Nhat Hanh talks about every moment can be a meditation, and really being present, just like Eckhart Tolle talks about the power of now. Like happiness is in the now. Happiness is in the moment, and so if everything is just this filler leading up to these peak experiences, think about how much planning goes into whether it's a birthday or a wedding, and there's this whole build up, and then it's almost a letdown, first, and really, when do we experience that? People. I heard an interesting talk about how when do we enjoy a vacation the most, right? Really, we enjoy the vacation the most when we're remembering it, right?
Yeah.
We save all this money, we all this anticipation. We go away for our 2 weeks or week or whatever we manage. And then we come back, and it's all those months after where
it's so good to be back home.
where we reflect on, that could be part of it. But we reflect on, remember when we were here, and there might have been a cool restaurant or something. But we get all this happiness from reflecting on these little moments, right? So happiness is always in the moment. It's you take it with you. And it's often in just reflecting on certain times in your life, or anticipating things in the future that get you excited, right? So but at the end of the day, it's all in here, and it's all in this moment, right?
Yeah, and it's so, and again, it makes maybe going back to Viktor Frankl a bit, but yeah, this power of choice. I mean, I think a lot about when I go for a run. If you go out running in the sun, and the sun is shining on you, and it feels great, but after a while it becomes too hot and it's just annoying. Or when you go out running and it's raining and it's cold, and I don't want to go into this running, but after a while you feel the rain cooling down on your face, and you feel the water, the raindrops on your face, and it's really sort of soothing you. It's a great feeling. So it's all about that perspective. How do you want to see the situation, right?
Well, what baffles me is when I'm walking, when I go for a walk, and obviously I love to walk in nature. So I'm lucky that I live in a very green city. But what baffles me is when it's a beautiful day, like all the conditions, the temperature is perfect, the sun is shining, and the birds are singing, and I see someone walking past me with a scowl on their face, and I think, and I feel bad for them, and I think, how can you be missing all of this? How can you be missing all this good stuff that could put a smile on your face? And clearly there are, because the problems are never there. Rarely is it that the problems are here and now, right? I mean, I could be talking to you, you could be telling me that I've got this problem, but as we're talking about it, the problem's not there. The problem's either in the past or in the future. It's looming somewhere, but it's not here and now, right? And so we spend so much time ruminating on the past or worrying about the future, and I think that's another huge obstacle to our own happiness, is how much of our time is occupied with all this negative thinking, right? So I think structuring your beliefs in a way that support happiness, making sure that you keep your thoughts in check. That's why mindfulness practice and meditation is all key to living a happier life. So, so yeah, I don't know. Have we covered enough? Have we given people enough tips and pointers?
I guess. I mean, one thing maybe that's something we could end up with. Something that I really, and I guess all of us do from time to time. But thinking about, so what are you happy about right now? So what are you appreciating right now? And I think, because that's really what you're saying, right? So finding what you can appreciate in this moment, and there's always something, even in the worst situations. What can you find here that is worth appreciating, right? So could I just ask you, I mean, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot.
No, absolutely. I was just
what are you appreciating right now?
Well, it's funny because I was just thinking before, as you were talking, how, oh man, I just feel a lot better having this conversation from where we started, because I have been thinking about this state of where our society is going, and it causes me some concern. And it's always good when I can circle back and go, yeah, actually everything's okay, everything's working out. And so I'm like, I'm really glad we're finishing up with the positive stuff, or we were able to shift because I love talking about this stuff, and when you sent me the email and recommended this as a topic, I put a smile on my face right away. That's totally my topic, and so like I just I'm not a great public speaker, but I love to talk. I love to have conversations. That's why, at the beginning I tried to do, 10, 15-minute podcasts just with me talking. And I didn't get a lot of enjoyment out of it. It stressed me out. And my inner critic was very active. And so, for me, this makes me happy. These conversations, I mean, it's a big part of why we do these, right?
Yeah. I think you're a pretty good public speaker. I think you're being, as you said, you have a hard inner critic. I think you're being harder on yourself. No.
And what about you?
For me, I was thinking about the same thing. I'm just really happy that I can have the opportunity to speak to. I mean, again, it's about connecting with someone that I enjoy speaking with. I don't expect anything. We're not getting paid from this, but talk about interesting stuff, and it makes me feel happy and good. What can I say? What is it not to appreciate about this? And this sets a wonderful foundation for the rest of my day. That's for sure. So.
Absolutely. And then if I can add a second one, I mean, the positive feedback that we got to the podcast, I just got that this morning. Someone, sending that from, and the fact that it was in Guatemala, a long way away from where we are, but as much as and I really appreciate constructive feedback, and I've had feedback that was really helpful. It was critical, but it was helpful. And some people will get tons of good news and one bad news, and then they'll just focus on that. And for me, getting a nice compliment on our format, because we do this long format for us. Whether people might prefer to have more of a 5 or 10 minute, here's the bullet points on happiness, and we want to have a conversation. And so knowing that there's just one person out there who appreciates that made me happy, because if you can just reach one person, and I know people want to get lots of clicks, they would prefer to have thousands or millions of viewers. I'm happy if we can affect in a really positive way just a handful of people. I'm just as happy with people who kind of have us going on, and a million people having us, listening to us in the background and not really getting out of it. So
yeah, I echo that for sure.
Cool. Well, then let's leave it there. I hope that people listening have been reminded of or been encouraged to think more about what happiness is to them. I think defining it is the first step, and then recognizing the choices they're making and the environment they're putting themselves. Is it really making me happy? So yeah, I hope that's been valuable to people listening. I definitely, a couple of things you mentioned reminded me and also got me thinking more, because I've been also thinking about what's causing the nihilism, and I didn't realize that Finland was now on on the one of the top countries. I always think of Denmark
Yeah.
on that one. So
They seem happier somehow.
so yeah. Anyway, it's been a productive talk for me, and it's a topic I always love to get into. So. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks, Toby.
Yeah.
Another
Thanks,
great
Peter.
conversation, and appreciate it. So, for everyone else listening, have a great and I'd say have a very happy rest of your week or weekend or wherever you're listening to this. And remember, it's not selfish to try and be happy. You'll actually probably have a lot more positive to give the world if you are successful more often. So, I'll leave you with that. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will talk to you next time. See you, Toby.
Yeah. See ya. Bye bye.